Welcome to Sex is Medicine, your number one resource for holistic sex education. I'm Devi Ward Erickson, and I invite you to join me every week for another enriching and powerful conversation about the intersection of sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth. Each episode of Sex is Medicine is dedicated to awakening your heart and mind to the true purpose and power of human sexuality. Please join me on this journey of self-discovery as we explore the art of using pleasure as medicine to awaken, heal, and empower every area of your life. Sex is Medicine broadcasts every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific on Contact Talk Radio Network. You can listen to the replay and subscribe to Sex is Medicine on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. And now get ready for another episode of Sex is Medicine. Hey everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Devi Ward Erickson, once again up all in your ears, bringing you another episode of Sex is Medicine, your number one resource for holistic sex education online. We are here with another Ask a Sexologist episode with my lovely retinue of tantric dakinis and certified sexologists to answer your questions about sexuality, spirituality, pleasure, and personal growth. I'll introduce us once again. For the record, in my upper left-hand corner, I have Sequita Whitfield, the glorious and wonderful, also a Tantra Mastery faculty member, Tantra Mastery instructor and faculty member of the Institute. We have Karen Craig in the lower left-hand corner. We're going to circle back to Karen in just a minute because she's some amazing news to share with all of us. And then we have the glorious and spectacular Miss Rosie Bitts, who was just on stage shaking it up a few weeks ago for all of us. So yes, welcome to our panel of Ask a Sexologist. Before we dive into our conversation today, I am going to invite us all to give a round of applause to the lovely Karen Craig, who was just the doula for for the birth of her daughter's baby. Her first baby. So tell us all about that, Karen, because you went to doula school so that you could be present and support your daughter giving birth. I mean, that is some fucking commitment. I'm just saying. Like Mother of the Year award. What was that like for you, Karen?
I mean, absolutely. Just it kind of defies description. But so to, kind of keep it in connection with what we're talking about here, one of the things that always comes home for me whenever, with the practice, and I too am on the faculty as a Tantra Mastery instructor or a certification instructor for the Institute. And so the modality of Tantra we teach, I mean, I went through a whole doula program, so I'm a trained doula, so that aspect of it. But there was so much of this modality that I was able to weave in. So, for example, the breathing techniques that we teach, it was like being able to lead her in the breathing. So there were obviously many times where, she was holding her breath or doing the breathing that she was taught in the programs she took, but being able to lead her through that breathing. And so you could almost hear that pain being transformed into, she probably wouldn't say out and out pleasure, but you could hear the transformation of that experience for her. I mean, everything from the communication techniques that we teach, things like, that I wasn't even aware of, like, for example, they'll use practices in Western medicine, like, for example, to induce the labor. And so they're using drugs that mimic things that we teach about, like oxytocin. So being able to, employ techniques that actually give rise to that natural oxytocin. So it was just, just being able to use all that and seeing how it all weaves together and, can show up in whatever you're doing in your life. And, for me, watch my grandson crowning and being delivered into the world was like just mind boggling, and being able to support my daughter in that way. And so being able to use these techniques, and, you know, we talk about being fully present, you know, so being able to be fully present and have the stamina, like the physical, emotional, and spiritual stamina, you know, to do it. So, I mean, you know, when people talk about sex, it's like, yeah, trust me, if you can deliver a baby using these techniques, you can have like mind-blowing sex. I mean,
wow. Yeah. So tantric birthing, that's a whole
tantric birthing. Yeah.
I mean, really. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And another
soon.
Yeah. And another incredible example of how Tantra is about, it's a lifestyle. It's not just, oh, I'm going to have great orgasms in the bedroom. It's like, let's have like every aspect of life. Birth, death, like I did tantric death with my mother. You know, I mean, it's similar to a birth, but going the opposite way, and woven and used all of my tantric methods to support and facilitate that process. So no matter what end of the spectrum, birth, death, and everything in between, Tantra is about transforming every aspect of life. So yeah, wow, I love that. Yeah. Yay. All right. Well, congratulations, Granny Karen Craig, doula Karen Craig, welcoming a new human to this planet with mindfulness and love and presence. So speaking of all that, we're going to dive into our Ask a Sexologist topics for today. So we have some wonderful questions that have come in, and we have a very dense one, dense in a good way, meaning there's a lot of juice, a lot of meat to it, that we're going to dive in first. Okay, so hello, I have a question. I am a woman, though a tomboyish trans woman, so I went through male puberty. I've had vaginoplasty surgery, so I find that I release less energy through orgasm. However, I still release a spermless seminal fluid with nutrients when I orgasm. Maybe because I have not much testosterone in my body, that loss of energy is generally enough to end the sexual cultivation, just as male ejaculation does. So has a vagina, still emitting seminal fluid, though without sperm, and feels a depletion after orgasm. I've tried to work on this by doing Kegel exercises regularly, and will continue to do so. Working with the Kegel muscles helps the orgasm to last longer. Good noticing. Also, the Taoist microcosmic orbit helps quite a bit. Beautiful. So you're seeing some results, you're practicing, and you're seeing some results. That is good. There may have been times when I've had a peak in sexual pleasure followed by an orgasm emission. So maybe that means I've had 2 in a row, but it's not clear that I've had multiples. So you're wanting to experience more clearly having multiple orgasms. I also tried doing sessions where I stimulate myself for an hour or hour and a half and do edging. Still haven't had clear multiples yet. And since I know someone who has had multiples through breast stimulation, I also work on breast stimulation, which is really pleasurable, though the energy is harder to increase there. So I guess I have both female, quote unquote, sexual problems, getting aroused enough, and male ones, quote unquote, premature ejaculation. If my goal is to enhance arousal so that the feeling of bliss becomes spiritually transformative, what would you suggest? Should I basically keep going and practicing, or are there other methods that I'm not doing that you would encourage me to do? Thank you so much for any advice. So there's a lot to unpack there. I think there's multiple questions, which is why I wanted to bring it to the entire team to address. So starting off, what are your thoughts? Rosie, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Number one, amazing. Like, hey, you are having amazing orgasms. And I don't think there's any sexual problem there. You know, like there's, you want to tweak it, but the fact that you're experiencing so much pleasure and having all these orgasms is outstanding to begin with. And I would say what it sounds like to me, to some degree, is getting used to having your vagina, right? Orgasm is still sort of ingrained in your brain that it looks like a very linear, very male type thing. And often vaginal orgasms are not these incredible, like your multiples are not these incredible peaks of pleasure and then a down and then incredible, you know, they're like these gentle waves. So I would really encourage you to start to get into like looking for the waves as opposed to the big peaks, because you may be having a number of waves And as you focus on those are going to become multiples. Like a lot of cisgendered women who are born with vaginas don't realize they're having multiple orgasms or even vaginal orgasms until they start to get into it. And then that pleasure expands. So I would say that would be first and foremost, is start to just play with the pleasure you have and start to notice and just that retraining of your brain as to this is a new pleasure normal. And you get to explore. It's so exciting. You get to explore something that very few people have access to, right? Your orgasms are somewhat new, and like it's quite beautiful that you're exploring something pretty new, which I understand leaves you to be a bit alone in the world, although there's lots of trans women out there that you could probably share with, but there's not a lot of there's not a lot of documentation. Yeah. But I think that sounds like an incredible starting point. And I think we're going to talk about some of like the tantric things that you could do too. So I'll let some of the other ladies say about the tantric stuff. But yeah, that would be my thing, is just start to look at it and start to remember, what I experienced as a masculine orgasm, or the orgasm you were having when you had a penis, is very different than the orgasm you're going to have now that you have a vagina.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rosie, because that is such a huge, huge distinction. So much of our understanding about orgasm in the West, as I've said before, is modeled after the male ejaculatory orgasm. So it's sharp, it's fast, it's a sharp rise, a peak explosion, bells and whistles, and then a decline in arousal. And so that's what we think, as a society, that's what orgasm should look like. But as we've discussed so many times, that's only one type of orgasm. And all the other different orgasms feel and taste, and we experience in them so very differently. And what you said is so perfectly around the vaginal orgasms are more like waves. And if you keep looking for the tsunami, you're gonna miss the build of the wave itself. And they often arise very subtly, very gently. And so I agree that it sounds like, from what you've written, that you are experiencing vaginal orgasms. And if you're able to really put your attention on the pleasure, take it off the need to orgasm and take it off the expectation of what orgasm should look like, and really just allow yourself to sink more deeply into the sensation of pleasure and enjoy it without a goal and without a demand for it to be anything other than it is. And then it will offer up its gifts to you. That's the thing. Orgasm is like an ocean, an infinite ocean. And if we let go and just like rest in the water, then it really, like, all the treasures rise to the surface and become made manifest to us, to be poetic about it. So Sequita, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm just going to go into that wave. That was like,
we're all having orgasms now. Keep talking, Davey. We're just about there.
I'm having an eargasm right now. I mean, just keep going. I want to honor you for exploring your full body. You mentioned working, exploring your nipples and how sensitive nipples can be and how erotic nipples can be. And for me, I've noticed that when I pleasure my nipples, it's directly related to my vulva. I mean, I get that charge from top to bottom. So I honor you for that, exploring that. And I would encourage you to do more of that. There are so many other ways to experience orgasm as well. And we're going to talk about that. But I just wanted to point out that was a good start for you. I'm happy for you.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Sequita. What are your thoughts, Granny?
Of course, so you know where my head is, obviously. But as you were talking about those waves, it just reminded me so much of, like talking in terms of like, childbirth, talking about labor. Like we talk about it like, just this painful, horrible experience, as opposed to the contractions being like waves. Yeah. And there's that actual resistance to the contractions that creates that tension in the body and that pain. Mm-hmm. And so just by like releasing that connection to it as being this, let me hold on, as opposed to just riding it, like literally like a surfer on a wave, just riding it. And so, it's exactly what you were saying, just instead of being focused on the and the orgasm, just hang out in that space, like, oh wow, what does this feel like hanging out in this pleasure? And she talked about wanting to experience more bliss and the spiritual aspects of it. Mm-hmm. And so spiritual, to a large degree, is really what you experience through your body. So it's like in really being fully present in your body and being able to ride that and hang out in those spaces of pleasure and instead of trying to get someplace else, which is really just a form of resistance, resisting being in that pleasure. So I'm like co-signing on everything all of my colleagues said.
Yeah. And I love that point. Thank you so much, Karen, that, so often we have this concept that spirituality means something outside of ourselves or something that we have to reach and strive for. And so many of us on this journey have experienced that spirituality is really about coming home to our humanity. It's really about just being present in the body without any judgment or any attachment to the way we think things should be. And being fully just present and rooted and anchored and allowing the messages of the body to arise without interference and without suppression or judgment or attachment. So I love that. I love that the spiritual journey it's going in. It's not necessarily striving or going out. So I'm gonna address your Tantra yoga practice because that's what I want to focus on. So as I said, so you're doing pelvic floor exercises, so Kegels. I would venture that Kegels may be insufficient for you. I would recommend doing. So the difference between Kegels and like yogic exercises that are actually going to build not just your pelvic floor, but your energy body, your downward voiding winds. The difference between these two is the integration of mindfulness and the breath. So with Kegels, you're just kind of squeezing and, clenching and whatever. And there isn't this emphasis on harnessing the breath and synchronizing it with the muscular contractions and release. In yoga, that is the emphasis, is that every movement, any contraction is synchronized with the breath, whether you're contracting on the inhalation or the exhalation. And the reason for that is that when we integrate the breath into the movement, that allows us to access the energy body. Why you want to access the energy body is because that is going to enhance your experience. The energy body is senior or superior to the physical body. So if you're only working on the physical level, your results are going to be minimal compared to if you're working with the entire organism, the entire organism, which is the body, the physical body and the energy body. Also, as you may or may not have heard us discuss, that when we're talking about the pelvic floor exercises, one of the reasons we do them in Tantra is to build what are called the downward voiding winds. So the downward voiding winds are the moving currents of energy in your energy body that support the physical functioning of everything basically from the waist down. So it supports all of your elimination, whether that's poop, pee, ejaculate, menstrual blood, orgasm, babies, all of that is governed by your downward voiding winds. In the Western society, our downward voiding winds are very untrained in general, and they often tend to be loose and weak. And we tend to leak chi through our lower end. And when we're leaking chi, that means that we're not holding a charge. And if we're not holding a charge, we're not able to build a charge. So a lot of the sense I get of the intensity that you're seeking is charge related. It's about building a charge. And that's why frequent ejaculation is so debilitating for cisgender men, is because of the depletion and because they aren't able to maintain or build a charge. So all of that is to say, your pelvic floor exercises, I would encourage you to look at training in Taoism, because it sounds like if you're working with a microcosmic orbit, you're already familiar with Taoist practices. So looking at Taoist pelvic floor exercises, or if you decide that you're going to train with an authentic Tantra practitioner, our pelvic floor exercises are rooted in Taoism, and then we add the Tibetan 5-element Tantra to them. The other thing I want to say about your Tantra yoga practice is you're mentioning the microcosmic orbit, which indicates to me that you have some proficiency with energy body yoga. So the next level of energy body yoga for you is going to be Tibetan 5-element Tantra. So you asked if there's anything I recommend. It is that. Tibetan 5-element Tantra is going to give you direct access to your central channel, your energy body, all of your major energy centers, and it is going to not only balance and heal them, but it is going to radically enrich and bolster them. And that is going to translate to your physical body, your ability to have sensation. And it's also going to help heal any residue from surgeries. Surgeries are traumatic. And I don't know, how many years post-op you are. And it takes years and years and years for the tissue to fully heal, for the nerve pathways, and then for the energy body channels to regenerate. So that's what we want to do. We want to regenerate and empower those channels of your energy body. And Tibetan 5-element Tantra is going to give you the ability to do that radically on your own for the rest of your life. That's what I love about it. You will fish for the rest of your life, which means you will eat for the rest of your life. And what you're going to be eating are great orgasms. So,
Well, I was going to add too that it's, when we're doing these practices and you're working with the energy body, you may not even be focusing. Like I haven't been focusing on expanding orgasms in a long time. I'm pretty happy with my orgasms. And I've recently started having clitoral multiple orgasms, which I'd never had before. And just boom, one day, all of a sudden. But that's like the alignment of doing that inner work, right? Of doing that spiritual work and that energy body work, that suddenly you just get this other thing that happens that you may not even be working towards or didn't even think about or didn't even think that you needed. And then you get a little treat.
I love that point. Exactly. Because it's like peeling, like our fullest expression as humanity, as human beings is bliss, is orgasm, just like, what? And like, again, if we clear away the things that are in the way, the impediments, then we just naturally radiate our true state. We don't have to become anything else. It's not about becoming something different. It's about being more fully who and what we truly are, unobscured and unimpeded. And that's the other thing that I love about energy body yoga is the shit that just releases that we didn't even know was there. Like, didn't even know that I'm having that same thing too, Rosie, where I'm like, wow, I'm having 4 or 5 clitoral orgasms. This is a whole new development. I don't know what happened. I wasn't seeking it. It just arose naturally as a result of my practice. So you get all these perks. It's kind of like getting little blessings in your garden that you didn't expect.
Yeah, totally.
So yes. Go on, Karen.
Yeah. I mean, I like in listening to you, I'm like, of course, heard it all, teach it all, but like hearing you say it, like what I'm seeing for the writer is like the integration of that male and female energy and those two expressions, because that really is what it means to be whole. And that's what yoga is. Yoga is a weaving. So when we talk about those Taoist practices and Taoist yoga practices, it's not like, well, I was male and now I'm female, like kind of either or, as opposed to like bringing those energies together. And when you just listening to you talk about, the downward voiding winds and what that means, it's both, our excretion and our retention, so you mentioned a baby. So it's being able to retain the baby. There are women who aren't able to retain the baby and end up with, stillbirths or miscarriages, those kinds of things. Yep. And then when it comes time, being able to do that release. Yeah. So it really, and that's what it all is. It's like that balance, we inhale and we exhale, so being able to do both. If you skipped one, then you would die. If you just take a breath or, all you did is exhale. So, I mean, it's like you just can't keep inhaling without the exhalation. So, when I'm thinking about what the writer said, it's just like being able to fully embrace both aspects, so that male energy and that female energy without feeling the need to repress one or reject one. And so that they really become woven together.
Yes. Beautiful. So balance. That's what all of this is about. Like balance is the key to everything we seek in life. all joy, harmony, bliss. It all comes from a wonderful, beautiful dance of balance in life. And so I guess long story short, writer, we don't think you have a problem. we think you're doing great, and we celebrate your practice and your diligence. And if you wanted to add, I would suggest Tibetan 5-element Tantra if you really want to enhance and increase the results of your practice. So you can learn that from our school, Institute of Authentic Tantra Education, authentictantra.com, or you can check in with any of our certified practitioners and they can teach you 5-element energy body yoga. That's why we certify them, so they can teach everywhere. So again, you can find out more about our certified practitioners at authentictantra.com. So thank you everyone for your input, and thank you, writer, for sending us this beautiful, beautiful question.
Yeah.
So speaking of, so we have another question, and this also goes into your wind energies, your downward voiding winds. So the question is, are there anything like pills to make your manhood big and keep you going longer during sex? So I'm wondering if that means, are there non-pill methods to make you bigger and keep you longer? Or we can't give you pill recommendations. We don't prescribe pills. But we'll talk about the non-pill remedies to make you bigger and keep you going longer during sex, because this is actually one of our areas of speciality, is helping people with lingams last as long as they want and cultivate ejaculatory choice as opposed to reflex. So what are your thoughts on that, guys? Bigger penises and lasting longer during sex. What comes to mind for you?
Semen retention. I mean,
semen retention. Yes. Tell us more about that, Sequita. What is semen retention? What does that do for us?
Well, for us as female body, it helps enjoy the lingam being erect and harder longer. For the lingam owner, the benefits are, you're going to last longer. You're going to enjoy yourself. You're going to learn how to separate orgasm from ejaculation, which to so many men are like, are you kidding me? That's crazy. But trust us, you want to learn that.
Trust us.
Yeah. And so the other benefit is a healthier body. You're not depleted. You're not moving into depression. You're not overusing your life force energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else? What are your thoughts?
So I remember, Devi, maybe you remember this too. In the class that I graduated from in 2016, we had a participant who was doing a lot of Taoist practices as well to make his penis bigger. And I think he had a good inch growth in his penis during his erection from the Taoist practices he was doing. So I would say explore some Taoist practices, definitely. And, in Taoist, there's a slightly different slant to the way we teach semen retention. I like the way we teach semen retention. For me, it works for many different reasons, but I would explore both, right? Check into the semen retention with us or through Taoism, and then check into Taoism as far as how to extend and grow your penis, because I know from this young man, it worked incredibly well for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Karen?
I'm thinking fire element. So we work with each of the elements that are in nature and also in us. And so really building that chi, building that power, so when you think about an erect lingam, when you think about a hefty lingam, what you're really talking about is power. So really cultivating that power. And also, fire releases attachment. So even just releasing the attachment to having to look a certain way, or that preoccupation we have with size in every area, whether it's the size of breasts, whether it's the size of lingams, our overall size, there's just this preoccupation and this attachment. So even dissolving that attachment could actually have the potential of there being some physical growth there, or just being confident in what he has. But it's like, I know how to work with what I've got. Like, I'm not attached to that idea that it's got to look a certain way or be a certain number of inches or whatever it is. So I'm thinking that there's a lot with fire element, that cultivation of bliss and all of those kinds of things that could really help this particular writer.
Absolutely. Hell yes to everything that everyone said. And so in terms of techniques for your lingam to get bigger, the Taoist exercises that Rosie mentioned, we teach them and as part of our certification program so that our students can teach other people out in the world. And my tantric mentor, one of my tantric mentors, also with these Taoist exercises, turning the clock, and like it's a lot of stretching and pulling on the lingam, and when you're erect and doing all these different exercises and maneuvers, and then with the breath and the movement, all that stuff. One of my tantric mentors said that they put on 3/4 of an inch in both length and girth. The other thing I do want to say, I think one of the hidden kind of secrets for lingams getting bigger, quote unquote, is the lingam massage that we teach is the somatic sexual healing methods. So the lingam is made of erectile tissue, and there's a lot of erectile tissue that's in the body, like the root and the bulb of your penis is like extensive. There's a lot of internal erectile tissue. And if we have trauma or wounding or judgment or, any kind of negative oppressive energy in the pelvis, it's kind of like that erectile tissue kind of gets like withdrawn and doesn't really want to come out and play all the way, right? So you may have a lot more length to your penis than you're actually aware of. And it might just be like kind of trapped. I mean, that may sound odd, but that's just the image I'm getting, that it just might be kind of like hiding, let's so to speak. And so doing full lingam massage and really massaging into your pelvis using the breathing techniques that we teach to help relax and re-regulate your autonomic nervous system, release wounding and emotion and trauma from the body. There have been tangible, I'm saying this because there have been students that have noticed increases in their length and girth from consistently doing lingam massage. And particularly after they release some type of emotional trauma that they weren't aware that they were holding on to, they've noticed that their erections are bigger, fuller, stronger, and longer lasting. So never underestimate the impact of trauma. And it doesn't trauma the way we use that term. It doesn't have to be a direct, overt trauma. Being, shamed as a little boy for touching your pee-pee, by somebody could be a trauma for you that you're not even cognizant of having. And that can keep all that energy and all that erectile tissue kind of locked inside the body. So I would really recommend lingam massage with yogic breathing methods that we teach at the Institute. Really, and as Karen said, working with the elemental energy to help change the way we think, right? Your penis you can have a 10-inch penis and still think that your penis isn't big enough, right? And like, it's all in your mind, right? So really changing the way we perceive our own bodies and the way we perceive ourselves in relationship to other people, we're going to find so much freedom and so much liberation from that. So I would also invite you to examine, like, why do you even think you want a bigger penis? Have you asked partners? Have they expressed dissatisfaction with the size of your penis? Because I've encountered, being a cisgender bisexual woman who's had sex with a lot of men, I've encountered so many men that think that they have small penises when they're either average or like way above average. But our cultural conditioning, just like it, F's with us yoni owners about our bodies, it F's with you guys in your bodies. So you may have a perfectly wonderful penis, and just be responding, be caught up in some cultural conditioning and feeling insecure and inadequate because of what society tells you, but not because of what's actually occurring. Yeah. So that's my 10 cents. On that topic. So no pills. Yes, Tantra. And then lasting longer. Absolutely. That's one of the things we specialize in well is supporting people with lingams in lasting as long as they want to and separating orgasm from ejaculation. That is key, because with semen retention, we don't want you to give up the orgasm. We want you to have choice and to regulate your ejaculation. So you ejaculate with mindfulness when you want to, but we want you to have like so many orgasms. We want to have we want you to be orgasmically enlightened. All right. So let's go into what are some easy ways to begin practicing semen retention? Since we're on that topic, I don't know if there's an easy way to well, I don't know. I think the way we teach semen retention is pretty, it's accessible. Yeah. Like, pardon me, we have students who like get it, have results like in one session. So what are your thoughts? Like, what have you guys seen using specifically the methods that we teach for semen retention in terms of the timeline of results from, introducing the method to being able to successfully retain an ejaculation?
I think it depends on the person very much. I've worked with clients that it's taken a long time, or I've had partners that it's taken a long time. And then I've had, one of my last sexual partners, I gave him like 5 minutes of instruction, although he had the body-to-body transmission. He figured out semen retaining with that 5 minutes of instruction, like within 6 weeks.
Wow.
Was fully semen retaining. Now that's a bit unusual because usually if I'm working with clients, it's going to be 6 weeks to give them all the instructions. That's what I usually do. But I would say, and I think what I gave to him was, focusing on his breath, releasing into pleasure, right? Ocean breath, releasing into pleasure, and even just being cognizant of the fact that ejaculation and orgasm were two separate things. And just with that little bit of knowledge, he was able to play until he started to separate it out on his own.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good point, that like our yogic propensities do play a huge role in how quickly we see results. Different body types are going to see results differently, and different propensities and different karmic propensities, and also how much you practice. And then your level of depletion going in. So what are your guys' thoughts on how to quickly accomplish semen retention?
Well, I mean, I'm curious about just the concept of quickly, and just the attachment to quickly. What does that look like? Because sometimes, and I know my husband, who's also a Tantra mastery instructor, he says sometimes with his male clients, it's that quickly that can be the issue, because they're trying to bypass things that they may not even be aware of. And like, let me just get to the tips and tricks. Let me get to like how I can, make my female partner, spin on the tip of my lingam, and then, but they can't do 10 breaths, much less 21 breaths. So they're having difficulty even being fully present in their own bodies.
Wow. Yes.
To even bring in 10 breaths. So, the idea, I mean, I love what Rosie said, because really what she's saying is there is no timeline, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 6 months, I mean, it just depends on the person and where they are. But using these techniques wherever the lingam owner started, by doing these techniques, he's going to be much further along than he was at the beginning.
Yes.
So, I mean, which is really the key.
Yes. Yeah. Growth, right?
Exactly.
We want to see growth. Yeah. Anything you want to contribute, Sequita?
I agree with everyone, what they've said. I had a client who caught on fairly quickly with the concept of separating ejaculation from orgasm. But the first block he came across, he stopped practicing.
Yeah.
And I find that to be true with some other men. It's like men have a hard time accepting they even have blocks to begin with. That's been my experience. And so just coaching them through that, it's okay, you're going to live, you'll make it through this block. That's been so far, that's been my experience, is that they just want to stop. They're like, no, I don't want to go through that. Yeah. I don't want to release it. They don't know how. And it's scary.
Yeah. And what comes to mind when you're saying that, like, that's the whole, we talk about the, how trauma releases from the body. So we go from numb to pain to irritation to function. So if we're accustomed to not being aware of a block, we would call that numbness, and then becoming aware of it is really uncomfortable. That shit does not feel good in any way, shape, or form. And so we may want to retreat back into the numbness to cope with or get away from the discomfort. And so again, because our society is not trauma informed, we don't have a lot of encouragement of like, no, actually, if we can move through that discomfort, if we can relax and breathe through it, if we can bring some pleasure there to that discomfort and get to the other side, then the glory of God awaits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that really, I mean, goes to the benefit of having a coach.
Amen.
Because if you're just watching YouTube videos, I mean, YouTube videos can be instructive, but it's very easy if you don't have that one-on-one coaching, or whatever excuse you're giving yourself for why you're not moving forward, like, oh, I don't have time, or this doesn't feel good anymore, so I must be doing it wrong, or this must not be the right program for me. But when you have that like one-on-one coaching, the coach is like, okay, so now where are you in this? Now, why have you stopped here? Let me support you and help you move you forward. So you're getting from that numbness to pain to irritation and full function, which is the end, the goal.
Yeah.
And what I find another benefit of having a coach or a counselor is that, we're not always aware of our blocks or our blind spots. Like I've had students that are encountering blocks and they just think that they're broken and failures. And I'm like, no, that's just a block. Like, just, you're doing great. This is good news that this is arising. This is a positive thing, right? But we're so conditioned and put so much pressure on ourselves for perfectionism and all of that when we run into the first little stumbling block, it's like, despair, right? Compare and despair without that guiding light on the other side. That's like, no, that's actually a good thing. You're actually doing great. The fact that you hit a brick wall is awesome.
Absolutely.
That's actually an indication that things are working as opposed to them not.
Absolutely. Which is why we like to say slowly, gently.
Slowly, gently. Yeah. So in terms of quickly integrating semen retention, praise and blessings for everything that's already been shared. And I just want to add a little distinction is that, there's 4 stages of becoming multi-orgasmic that we outline at the Institute. And the first is lasting longer. So the first step for semen retention is just learning to relax with sensation, learning, as Rosie said, to just be present in your body with the sensation without being overwhelmed by it and without needing to discharge it, embracing it, relaxing with it, and rewiring your literally the cells of your body to embrace and be present with this incredible sensation without needing to do anything about it. So that's it. The next is stopping ejaculation, and we teach specific methods for that. The next is separating orgasm from ejaculation. And when you're using the methods that we teach with guidance, this separation process usually takes between 6 to 8 weeks, we've seen. And so what that separation means is not necessarily that you're going to be able to have full climactic orgasms, hands-free. What that means is that these other more subtle, more fluid, more nuanced flavors of orgasm begin to arise. As people with penises, you're capable of having over 11 different kinds of orgasms, just like we are. And they all feel very different. So that separation of orgasm and ejaculation, what that does is it begins to give rise to these other flavors of orgasm that you may have overridden or not acknowledged or not even noticed in the past because you were too focused on this climactic experience. So it begins to bring variety to your orgasmic palette, shall we say. And then the next step is being, hands-free, multi-orgasmic. And again, sometimes that's going to look like having climactic orgasms with no ejaculation or no hands. Sometimes it's going to look like having climactic orgasms using a semen retention method. Sometimes it's going to look like having 10, wave-like fluid orgasms that match your partner's vaginal orgasms. It's going to look all different kinds of ways. And what's important is to keep in mind is that it's not always a linear process. Sometimes it is, and that's super fun when I'm working with students like, oh, boom, 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 like clockwork. But often it's it's fluid and organic. And so it may be like, you last longer and then all of a sudden you have this whole body orgasm. And then you kind of go back to like, oh shit, I can hardly hold it for 2 minutes. And so it can fluctuate depending on what's happening in your physical body, what's happening in your emotional body, what's happening in your energy body. The key is really like, once you step on this path, relax and enjoy the fucking ride. Like, really because it's going to look like a whole bunch of different shit. And it's important to not attach to any one thing. So, I'll give you an example from my life. Like when I first started training in Tantra 13 years ago, I was having these like mind-blowing, crazy, ecstatic, epic orgasm. And then my brain was using in my ear, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't, it was incredible. It was my first experience of holding that much bliss. But now that I've evolved and my container has grown, what used to be overwhelming bliss is now just like a 2 on my pleasure scale. And so now my perception of what is blissful and overwhelmingly orgasmic has matured and grown and changed and altered. And there are times when I go through phases where my orgasm is not as accessible as other times because maybe I'm dealing with a lot of stress or maybe I have a deep block coming up. So if I freaked out about it every time my orgasm wasn't amazing, I would have quit a long time ago. But I'm aware that this is a journey. It's a ride. It's like a wave-like orgasm. That's what we're doing. That's what life is. It's one big, long, wave-like orgasm. And there's going to peaks and there's going to be valleys. And the goal is to just be present and embrace the ride, like really relax and enjoy the fucking ride. That's what we're here to do. So that's what I have to say about that. All right, last question to bring us home. There was a request if we could talk about healing sexual trauma using spirituality. So that's a deep one. We're going to try and take a crack at it in our remaining time left. We got about 15 more minutes, but not a specific direct question, but just in general, if we can talk about healing sexual trauma with spirituality. And that's what we've all done. All of us on this panel have addressed and transformed sexual trauma using the spiritual technique of Vajrayana Tantra. So, I want to start this off. It depends on what your concept of spirituality is. Not all spiritual paths are going to help you heal trauma. Some of them are really about avoiding and disassociating from your trauma. That's some spiritual paths. If you're talking about Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, now that is going to bring you face to face with your trauma and give you tools to transform it. So what has your experience been, you guys, in using specifically like the Buddhist tantric methods to address and heal trauma? Anyone want to take a crack at it? Rosie?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So I was joking with my son this morning. I was like, well, this is why I'm a tantric Buddhist. He was talking about me being angry and like angry at a past situation and feeling that anger and just like really getting into it. And I was like, that's why I'm a tantric Buddhist, because I'm about experiencing the full gamut and extent of what my feelings are and then transmuting it, but only transmuting it when the time comes of having experienced it first.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a big part for me, which has been deeply healing, is allowing, I think we talked earlier about, or we touched on, getting in touch with our humanity and that being a deeper and deeper part of the spirituality. And for me, that's really been it, is getting into those places. It's not being this like airy fairy, good vibes only. Oh, it's like, no, I'm fucking angry. I want justice. I'm going to experience this deeply. I'm going to go into that deep and dark place and that shadow place because I'm no longer afraid to do that because I actually have a container that's also going to bring me out.
Yes.
Right. I have these practices that are also going to transmute, that anger into clarity.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it works in that sense. That's what I've been experiencing. Like that's been what's been most present for me in the last 48 hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's actually the journey of spirituality. Again, like we were talking about, it's not about leaving or disavowing or disassociating. It's actually about really claiming and really embracing the totality of our human experience, even when it feels gross, even when it's unpleasant. Like that's where we have to look. We have to look at the wound in order to know how to treat it.
And it's riding the line between, and I love this about Vajrayana Buddhism, it's riding the line between ultimate and relative truth.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And for people who don't understand, ultimate truth being that like kind of macro view of we are all one and things are beautiful and there is a purpose to everything. Right. And relative truth being like, there is fucking suffering right now. We're living through a pandemic. People are dying. And you're riding that line between the two. And that's where like the non-attachment comes in. And so for me, having practices to ride through all of that and utilizing, within our practices in particular, we're utilizing our highest form of energy, which is our sexual energy. And so that part, the sexual, it loses the porn value, it loses the taboo, and it just becomes a regular part of our spiritual practice.
Exactly. Beautiful. And what are your guys' thoughts using spiritual yogic practices to transform your sexual trauma?
That was beautiful, Rosie.
Yeah. And when you were speaking, Rosie, what it really connects with for me is just the whole concept of pleasure as medicine. So like we're taught, I always think of it like cleaning a pot, like getting the and scrub. And I mean, it can become clean, but it's also pretty abrasive.
Yeah.
So like with using pleasure, it's more like, you're soaking the pot and, and just leaving it there for a little while. And then, like all the stuff kind of bubbles up to the surface and you just wipe it off, and that's just, it's the same end result, but I mean, like, it's just such a much more pleasant experience.
Yeah.
And, to wind back around to, where we kind of started with the doula stuff, there's a whole concept now around orgasmic birth or erotic birth.
Yeah.
And the idea that it's not even so much that it doesn't have to be as painful, but that it can actually be pleasurable. And being able to harness those pleasure emotions and those chemicals and all the ways in which that rebalances our nervous system. So when we're talking about trauma, we're really just talking about our nervous systems being dysregulated by experiences that we've had, whether it's shame, whether it's, you missed the school bus and all the kids laughed at you, like whatever happened, and it causes that dysregulation. And so being able to bring that back into regulation using pleasure practices. And, like I love that, translating the jackal. And that's one of the tools that one of the more advanced tools we use, but where, that jackal is that, like that's in our ear, you're less than, you're fat, you're this, you're that, and, the shame, all those voices, and being able to translate that. So really that becomes your ally. Like you're able to go in and locate, like, where did that come from? And then connect with just the opposite experience. Like, what would it feel like? If that space was, felt safe or felt blissful or whatever, whatever was missing. And then being able to just kind of, I always like the word marinate, just kind of marinate in that space. And so you can, that's a way of bringing healing from, whether it's sexual trauma or any kind of trauma, really, because it doesn't matter what kind of trauma you have, it is going to affect you sexually.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
It affects every aspect of life. That's the thing about trauma. It's almost like it's a glitch in the operating system. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Sequita?
One of the things that happens for me on a kind of a regular basis, one of the traumas that I experience is feeling alone and separated. And so when I tap into that and I recognize that that's what I'm feeling, then I reach for the space element because that helps me to reconnect to that infinite self and remind me that I'm not alone, that we are all connected, and we're all connected by breath and death. And so when I get to that comfort place, and it's very visceral when I'm practicing space element, and I feel it in my entire body, and I feel that connection with every sentient being, then the trauma goes away. Whatever it was that was bothering me goes away. I feel whole, perfect, and complete just the way I am in that moment. And so that we say we meditate before we masturbate. So how can I feel pleasure if I'm not centered and grounded and whole in that moment? So if I practice some meditation first and I get grounded and I come back inside my body and I'm connected to source energy, pleasure is so much better. Yeah.
Thank you all. And I would say, in terms of using spirituality or spiritual paths to heal sexual trauma or any kind of trauma, again, it depends on the path that you're using. I was a monk for a decade. And the path that I was on was a dissociative practice. And it was absolutely necessary for me to cope with the enormity of the trauma that was in my body and my psyche again, we weren't trauma informed in the 90s. So it was a very different world than the one we live in now. So my coping would have been either, drugs and alcohol or this dissociative meditation. So I did that for a decade and I stayed alive. Yay! And when I encountered Tibetan 5-element Tantra specifically, I was hoping for another bypass. I was like, spirituality, that means I don't actually have to deal with being a human, when it's actually quite the opposite. In order to be fully realized, we must fully engage our humanity. And this concept that spirituality is something separate than our humanity is really rooted in aversion. And it's rooted in many times, as we've said, the patriarchy, but that's just kind of like a conceptual word that's kind of hard to grasp. It's rooted in aversion to our human experience. We want to escape it. We want to get away from it. And how many religious traditions or spiritual traditions teach us that being a human is inherently flawed? We find that in the Christian tradition, we're born out of sin. We find it in the Buddhist tradition. We find it in the aesthetic tradition in India, which is avoidance, and you have to overcome your carnal urges and all of that. And so what if, instead of viewing our natural human impulses as something bad and wrong, we viewed them as positive gifts, messages, communications from God? Like, our body is not separate from God. Our body is an expression of God. Our body is an expression of divine consciousness. Everything that is holy and whole and pure and ultimate, that is what our bodies are. So the more fully we can come home to the body and integrate and anchor and moor ourselves into the soma, the actual flesh, the more we are anchoring and rooting into our godlike wisdom. That is just the absolute truth. There is anytime there's a separation, that God's not there. God is union. So the union of our spirituality and our humanity, the reclamation of our sexuality is a vital and integral and healthy and normal part of our sexuality, and how our sexual pleasure is a portal to experiencing more of our bliss, our ultimate bliss awareness, our ultimate bliss nature. That is healthy. That is balanced, and that is true and correct. And so I'm going to say to you, wonderful questioner, any practices that you do that bring you home to the body, that is your portal to healing. That is your portal to releasing everything that stands in the way from you experiencing your wholness. So come home. So yay!
For you.
Yeah, yay. Okay, well, so everyone, this was so fun. I love doing these. We do these once a month. We try to do these the first Thursday of every month. So send us your questions. I love it when you send them to the website at connectedauthentictantra.com. That makes me very happy. And if you want to send them to us on Insta or Facebook, we will grab those too. But it helps us organize if you send them to connectedauthentictantra.com to make sure yours are on the top. So we're open for questions. Send them our way. And we will see you next month, the first Thursday, for another Ask a Sexologist. Before we sign out, I want to give a shout out to our panel. So Sequita, aside from playing with us at the Institute, where can people find you?
SimplyTantra.com.
SimplyTantra.com. And you can work with Sequita at the Institute. And Karen, another Institute person, where can people find you if you ever get pulled away from the Institute?
ExploreTantra.com.
ExploreTantra.com. And Rosie, who is also part of our student advisory board at the Institute, where can people connect with you to work with you?
RosieBits.com, or just Google Rosie Bits and you'll find all of my YouTube and social media and all the things.
And you have a program coming up, yeah?
Yes, I do. Actually, I have a bunch of different programs, but the newest one that's coming up is Calling in a Partner.
Ooh.
So if you are interested in bringing a partner into your life, then this is, and being really mindful about who you want to bring into your life and really discerning about what you want that partnership to look like, come join me.
Hell yeah. Okay, rosiebits.com, calling in partners, Tantra style. All right, for real Tantra style, clean. Clean Tantra style. All right, thank you everyone. Make sure you stay connected to us, to me, to all of us between shows at Authentic Tantra, and find this Authentic Tantra on Instagram and Facebook. We have awesome info coming out for you every single week. Trending Tantra topics on Fridays, Soulful Sundays. So we have all kinds of fun stuff out there for you. And make sure you subscribe in Spotify, YouTube, all the good places. Much love. Have a beautiful, beautiful weekend. We'll see you soon. See you next month. You've been listening to Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward Erickson, your #1 resource for holistic sex education. You can listen to and subscribe to Sex is Medicine on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Just search Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward. Stay connected with me and my guests on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Authentic Tantra, and learn how you can use Tantra as medicine to heal, awaken, and empower every area of your life at AuthenticTantra.com. Make sure to tune in to Sex is Medicine every Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific on Contact Talk Radio Network, and join our watch party every Thursday evening on Facebook at Authentic Tantra. We look forward to you joining us next week for another episode of Sex is Medicine with Devi Ward.